Hello. How are we all doing? Let me quickly double check. We are live. There is some controversies to delve into, isn't there? We'll talk everything Abu Dhabi in a moment. There we go. I've got hello, Sarah. How are you doing? Here we go. We're in. We're on. The season was all drama all the time. Yeah, Manny, completely agree. Hello, Sophie. How's it going? Hello, Shuba. How are we? Evie, hello. Max versus Russell, we'll discuss it. Don't you worry. There is other news on top of that. There's a few other bits and pieces that have kind of happened. Esteban Ocon, I did a video on it, so I'm not going to delve into it too much. We've got the Constructors Championships, obviously the battle for the victory, the battle for 6th place, whether that's still up for grabs, kind of delve into. And obviously, Lewis Hamilton's final race at Mercedes, a few drivers moving here, there, and everywhere. And probably the most important thing is what I put on the community tab a little bit earlier on. I'll leave it at there. But I think we're going to spend a good chunk of time discussing that. If you want to know what it is, head over to the community tab, or you can just sort of read the description, because I always do a little breakdown of everything that we've got to come in the description as well. Russell bullying a soon-to-be father. Interesting. I mean, he's kind of a father already, isn't he? Stepfather? Stepfather. So like half father? I don't know. Depends how much you take that. Russell is dating a father-to-be. Not sure. Make a compilation of Russell blaming everybody else but himself for the last 20 minutes. Yeah, Russell and Max, they're both interesting characters on and off track, aren't they? They're both a little bit strange, and we'll delve into it. Like, the whole situation, I think it's been a little bit overblown, but isn't everything when it comes to Formula One. A lot of the time, things do get a touch overblown in these. Okay, shall we delve into it then? We are talking, of course, the final round of the 2024 season. I mean, stepfather, if he marries Kelly, which basically confirmed. Yeah, exactly. They're gonna be two. That's what I was thinking. He's got P already, hasn't he? But we are heading into Abu Dhabi. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you. Just want to say thank you for another season of support. We've tried lots of different things again on the channel. Like, the channel is all about you guys and sort of the reception of different bits and pieces. We've delved into various different areas. Obviously, the live streams, I'm hoping you're kind of seeing the work that is going into them and appreciate that they are hopefully getting better. And I hope that you think they're getting better as well, because I certainly do. But I do just want to say thank you, first and foremost, for your continued support over the course of the year, whether you're just a viewer that has found the channel in the last few weeks or so, or you've been someone who's been at every single Grand Prix, for every single live stream across the entire season. Like, it means the world to me that I do get to just be here, chat Formula One, and have people to bounce Formula One off of, because none of my friends watch Formula One in any way. I tell them that I do this in my spare time, and they just sort of say, why? Why would you do that to yourself? But thank you. Stop saying final round. I keep seeing Lewis edits. Welcome to the final show. Yes, it's an interesting one. Am I a Liverpool fan? Yes. There's a Liverpool football there, just on my shoulder. Yeah, it does feel weird, doesn't it? There's lots of drivers. They're going to be saying goodbye to one team, moving to another. There's quite a few drivers that we're saying goodbye to. I was a little bit upset earlier this week when I was thinking about the fact that we're not going to get to say goodbye to Daniel Ricciardo this time around. I know Liam Lawson's been good fun. It's been good value for entertainment. We've had him clashing with Fernando Alonso. It's been entertaining to see. But on top of that, I do think just having a look at the season, and kind of delving into it, a little bit upset that we don't get to say goodbye to Daniel Ricciardo in the way that other drivers are getting their, final runouts with team X, Y, or Z. And even, Nico Hulkenberg got a really lovely statement from the Haas team. He's only been there a couple of years. And I know that Daniel Ricciardo been in and out of the Red Bull system, but again, just sort of assumed that there would be. But yeah, we've got Nico Hulkenberg moving, obviously Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu both leaving from the Stake Sauber team, Kevin Magnussen leaving from Haas as well, Ocon moving, guess he's already said his goodbyes, but he is in Abu Dhabi so that he can take part in that tyre test with Haas. So I imagine he'll be in and around the Haas garage, the Alpine garage, the grid over the course of the weekend as well. So we will get to see Esteban Ocon and that shift across. But yeah, there's a lot of drivers that we're saying goodbye to. They're moving, they're shifting around. Franco Colapinto, kind of, again, will this be his final race in Formula One? Maybe not, but it's been great to have him in for 9 races. Like, he has been really, really entertaining. And I just think it's going to be a nice send-off for quite a lot of drivers. And I almost, like, it's weird, isn't it? You don't want there to be anything go wrong. Like, I just kind of want every driver to finish the race, every driver to get that opportunity to say thank you. But undoubtedly, there's going to be spins, crashes, bits and pieces that go wrong for people. And you don't want it to end on that note, but I'm sure there's going to be a few drivers that end on a bit of a sour note with their various teams in one way or another. But it's kind of a good time for them to reflect as the season is coming towards a close. The Drivers' Championship is done and dusted. Let's quickly run through that. Obviously, Max Verstappen, crown champion a couple of races ago, just sort of slammed that home with a win in Qatar, really, didn't he? Lando Norris second, 8 points ahead of Charles Leclerc. That looked like it could become a bit of a battle. 8 points is not a huge margin, especially if Charles Leclerc was able to win the Grand Prix here in Abu Dhabi, but after free practice 2, that's looking less likely. And on top of that, there's also some Charles Leclerc news that we'll delve into. Oscar Piastri, 4th place, pretty much guaranteed. Sainz the same. Russell and Hamilton, I can't imagine sort of swapping around either. Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso is kind of there. Nico Hulkenberg versus Pierre Gasly for 10th place. Again, some people will say, all right, it's 10th place. What's the point in arguing about that? Are we really worried about who comes in 10th place? And I think we should be. I think for those backmarker teams and for those drivers like Nico Hulkenberg, Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, coming 10th is a really big thing. That is top half. And I know that we've now got 23 to become 24 drivers on this list because Jack Doohan's also going to get added to it. But you take the 20, don't you? It's a 20 driver championship with a few drivers dotted in here and there. So if you can finish in the top 10, that is a huge, huge achievement. And for those midfield teams, if you are the driver that comes 10th, you should be really, really proud of yourself and really, really pleased with how that season has gone. I do hope it is Nico Hulkenberg. Despite being a Pierre Gasly fan, there's Pierre Gasly hat and Pierre Gasly helmet just behind my head, as well as an RB jumper. The only reason I like RB is because Pierre Gasly kind of grabbed me when he was there, and I've kind of continued to just be there. So I know that most people would probably think I want Pierre Gasly to nab that 10th spot. But I just think for consistency's sake and across a whole 24 Grand Prix season, I think Nico Hulkenberg has been one of the best drivers on the Formula One grid this year. And I do think he deserves that 10th place spot. Because as I say, I do think that matters. And I do think the drivers care. As much as they'll be like, well, I'm not a world champion, blah, 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 blah. I think they do look back at their careers and go, oh, that 10th place finish in 2024, that was good. That was a good year. Nico Hulkenberg was having a nice time. And then on top of that, moving to Stake Sauber next year, despite Zhou Guanyu scoring 4 points last time out, I think it's going to be a long and tough year for Nico Hulkenberg. So at least he'll have that 10th place and has to reminisce on amongst that. Hello, Sally. Hello, Antonio as well. How are we doing? Doing the watch along today? Yes, indeed. Forgot to mention that at the top of the show. If you are a member or Patreon member, You are welcome to join us on the Discord. So there is a specific Discord that we watch along. We're watching Senna episode 2 on Netflix all together. Gasly has remained a one to watch, but yeah, Hulk does deserve it. Exactly, Lily. It's kind of the balance, isn't it? I think Pierre Gasly, of course, has had a stunning end to the season. Podiums, fifth place finishes. Like, it's been ridiculous from Pierre Gasly at points. But over the whole year, and again, that's kind of down to the Alpine car more than Pierre Gasly, maybe. I do think Pierre Gasly started the year a little bit slowly, even compared to Esteban Ocon. But as it's progressed, we've kind of seen Gasly come into the fore a little bit more. And then Nico Hülkenberg versus Pierre Gasly is just butted heads towards the end of it. Hello, Ray. How's it going? Lance Stroll behind that, 13th place. Esteban Ocon 14th. Obviously, Ocon can't score any more points, so that is done and dusted. I can't see Kevin Magnussen scoring 9 points and taking Lance Stroll. Nor can I kind of see Albon picking up 4 points, 11 points to catch up Esteban Ocon. I do think Alex Albon will remain 16th, Daniel Ricciardo 17th, Ollie Behrman 18th. Obviously, neither of those guys taking part. Franco Colapinto, could I see him getting a couple of points, getting across that Behrman barrier? Maybe, just maybe. Zhou Guan Yu, another couple of points, gets him above Franco Colapinto. I think that would be a big ask, considering they hadn't scored points for the entire season. To score back-to-back points would be very, very impressive from the Chinese driver. I do hope that Valtteri Bottas gets a point. As much as it was nice to see Lando Norris pick up a couple of points at the end there in Qatar, obviously fastest lap as well for him, I was kind of a little bit gutted that Valtteri Bottas didn't pick up a point as well. It's nice to see everybody get a point, isn't it? Apart from Logan Sargent, who obviously cannot get any points, will be the 23rd. I imagine he'll probably stay 23rd, and Jack Doohan will end up 24th. Although, if Jack Doohan can get an 11th place or higher, obviously pick up a point, then Jack Doohan can definitely enter the conversation above. How hard could Jack Doohan get? Let's say Jack Doohan wins the race. He could get up to 13th in the standings. It's a big ask. It's a big ask on Jack Doohan. But realistically, if Jack Doohan comes away with a couple of points, maybe if he comes away with a couple of points or 1 point, like, he's absolutely smashed his debut, hasn't he? I'm expecting him to probably come home 15th, 16th, something along those lines. You know, shuffle into the back of the pack and slot in 24th overall. Hope both Saubers get points in the last race. Love Joe. He's the best person. He's a lovely guy, isn't he, Joe? I supported Joe quite heavily in his first couple of years in Formula One. I did a podcast before with a couple of other guys, and they weren't not fans of Joe, but they were kind of, he's just a pay driver, he's just there for the sake of it. But I thought he did a really good job, and I think he's actually done quite a good job this season. He's just been given a car that's been absolutely undrivable for the majority of it. So unfortunate for Joe in that case, but We'll see. Maybe another couple of points would be lovely for Zhou Guan Yu just to end the season. And again, not 100% sure what he's doing next year. I can't remember. There was lots of rumours about him being a Ferrari reserve driver, and I meant to check whether that had been confirmed or not, but I can't see it. Can you imagine Doohan ending above Sargent? Yeah, it would be tough. I mean, Sargent got an 12th place finish. Yeah, 12th place finish. In Silverstone, didn't Sargent. So Jack Doohan would need to beat that. So Doohan would have to come 11th or higher, which is a tough ask on a track like Abu Dhabi as well, where generally speaking, we don't get too many DNFs. It's not too much drama at an Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, because a lot of the time there's not a lot left. Can Leclerc beat Norris to P2? Can Ferrari beat McLaren and Constructors? Yes, most definitely. They are both up for grabs. 8 points between Norris and Leclerc is certainly jumpable in terms of the Drivers' Championship. And talking of the Constructors' Championship, that 21-point gap between McLaren and Ferrari is also certainly jumpable, although I don't think will be done. Again, we'll delve into the Free Practice 1, Free Practice 2 data and analysis a little bit later on. McLaren look pretty swift. Red Bull confirmed to be third now. Mercedes confirmed to be fourth. Aston Martin confirmed to be fifth. That's Alpine score a ridiculous amount of points. There's 44 points available, basically. So I'm talking about Alpine winning the race. Like a 1-2 for Alpine would mean they would be able to jump Aston Martin. So chunky ask for the Alpine team. Could Haas do that as well? Yeah, Haas could jump Aston Martin as well with a 1-2 finish and the fastest lap point. Need that as well. Probably not going to happen. Probably not going to happen. But Alpine versus Haas has sort of spiced up a little bit. Nico Hülkenberg wanting to drag Haas to a 6th place. Kevin Magnussen's also been in pretty good form of recent races. Not too much drama. It was a little bit of a... Not too much drama on track a lot of the time. Understatement of the decade. Yeah. But no, Alpine versus Haas, I think we can say RB are out of that running. I can't see 13 points. It's a big ask. Big ask for those teams towards the back end of the pack. Williams 9th, Stakes Sauber 10th. Again, technically can jump up places, not guaranteed, but effectively guaranteed, considering the number of points they've scored over the course of the entire year. If they were able to get 40 points, they'd have probably done it once before. Apart from Alpine in Brazil, they really have ruined that whole idea of being consistent. Just have one good race. That's all you need. And then you're right in the mix when it comes to those championship positions. But let's delve into the main talking points then, the news stories coming out of it. I was going to start with, free practice 1, free practice 2, etc., etc. But I do think we just have to start with Max Verstappen and George Russell and this whole situation that has just blown, in my opinion, maybe a little bit out of proportion in terms of what these two drivers kind of should be talking about and then ended up having been talking about, and how this has exploded into it as well. Loganberry, interesting. But I think we've got to remember, first and foremost, this doesn't come from absolutely nowhere. There has always been a little bit of needle between these two, hasn't there? We've always seen George as the Mercedes man. I think whenever Max Verstappen, and there's been a few times, not just this year, that Verstappen has been talked about as going to Mercedes, that's always kind of irked George Russell a little bit. And then on top of the fact, there have been some comings together between these two before, haven't they? Generally speaking, they don't get on. I think is fair to say. Even before whatever happened in Qatar behind the doors of the stewards' room, these two have not got on with one another, and they've always not seen eye to eye. You can just go back to Baku, was it last season, where they had a little coming together, and Max Verstappen decided to try and go and have a chat with George Russell. George Russell told him to go and watch the onboards. Max Verstappen called him a dickhead. Like, there's always been a little bit of absolutely pummeling between these two in terms of just butting heads is the word I wanted there, not pummeling. Butting heads between these two when it comes to being out on track and off track as well. I think they are just so juxtaposed in their character. I think is the thing, isn't it? They are so different in terms of being human beings. And Formula One needs that sometimes. Formula One does need characters of all different types. Especially, it's really fun when those different types and different styles of driver. I think, if you want like a synopsis of this from the past, I think watching Rush, or just going back and watching the kind of James Hunt, Niki Lauda seasons, those two drivers could not be more opposed to one another. Like, James Hunt and Niki Lauda couldn't be more different of people. But that makes for a very captivating story, and hence why the Rush film was made, right? The Rush as a film, and they were trying to make a Formula One film about a year or a few years of Formula One history. There's loads that they could have picked from. There's a reason they picked Logan's. There's a reason they picked Nicky Lauda and James Hunt, right? Because it has that juxtaposition to it. And that is where the Max Verstappen, George Russell stuff kind of starts. Then you get the incident. Oh, I've put the Hamilton picture over. Then you get the incident that happened in Qatar. Right? You get these two characters, these two juxtaposed drivers, and then they have another coming together. Now, at the time, I kind of brushed it off as a little bit of a nothingness, to be honest, because even during the session, like even during qualifying, we all saw the onboard. We saw George get a little bit out of shape behind Max Verstappen. And we all thought, yeah, okay, maybe Max Verstappen might be penalised in one way or another just for getting in the way. We sometimes do see that in qualifying. But there wasn't too much in it. And neither of them were on flying laps. They were both on, slow laps. So building up that temperature in their tyres. And I at the time, just off the bat, I mean, you can go back and watch qualifying. I was on a live stream. I can't, lie about it. At the time, I thought it was a bit of a nothingness, and maybe Max Verstappen might get a penalty if the stewards were a bit harsh. Like if the stewards were really coming down on that kind of thing. Because Max Verstappen was going very, very slowly in quite a high-speed sector of the track. He argued he was letting Fernando Alonso and Lando Norris past, and I sort of saw that as, oh yeah, maybe he was just letting those two past, and then just accidentally got in the way of George Russell. We see drivers get in the way of each other all the time. Oscar Piastri got a penalty in Imola for getting in the way of Kevin Magnussen. Again, but that was Kevin Magnussen on a flying lap, so it's a little bit more dramatic there, isn't it? You only get so many flying laps in qualifying. Who do I think is lying? I don't think either of them have said that they're anything to kind of say that one or the other is lying, right? I think, well, Max Verstappen said that he'd never seen a driver try to, in some slightly more, derogatory words, try and screw over another driver that much to get a penalty. In the stewards' room, George Russell probably was pushing quite hard to get Max Verstappen a penalty. I think anyone would, because there was pole position on the line. There was a possibility of a win on the line. If Max Verstappen got a 10-place grid penalty, that makes George's life way easier in the race, doesn't it? Because he doesn't have to deal with Max Verstappen probably at all. George Russell, okay, it didn't end up being that way because the Mercedes car was pretty awful in race trim and ended up ruining its tyres, especially that front left. We ended up seeing Lewis Hamilton's puncture. That wasn't just because of the debris. Obviously, the debris had a play for it, but also because those tyres were shot to pieces. So, George Russell is kind of thinking, if I can get Max Verstappen a penalty, I can probably, have a much easier race on my hands. It's just, if what Max is saying and George Russell was overly trying to get that penalty, I think that does kind of go against what we generally like and what we generally see in F1. I think the thing that irked Max is a lot of the time when we hear feedback from the stewards' room, even though the drivers absolutely lose their minds over the radio in the heat of battle, once they've kind of come out of the cars, they've had 10 minutes, they've wandered around the garage, and then they head to the stewards' room. By that time, they've cooled down enough and they can kind of see it from a perspective of, oh, okay, if I was in the other car, would I have, probably wanted, or would I have sort of seen that as deserving a penalty? I can generally see it from the other driver's perspective. And a lot of the time, the stewards decide something and the drivers just kind of take it. I think here, the reason Max Verstappen was so annoyed is because he was expecting George Russell to be like those other drivers in many other ways, right? Like that incident. And therefore, George Russell to say, oh, if it was me, it was one of those things, etc., etc. But George Russell kind of put his foot down and said, no, like, he got in the way, he ruined my warm-up lap. That then meant my tyres were out of the window. That then meant my qualifying lap, like my final qualifying lap, wasn't as good as I think it could have been. And I think that's fair. George Russell can kind of say that. Max Verstappen can get annoyed at that. But the way that it played out, again, a one-place grid penalty was weird. I felt like the stewards kind of just needed to make a decision. They did make a decision. It was a slightly odd decision in one way or another. I think the thing that's kind of come from that, the repercussions that have come this week with George Russell's statements, his perspective, are what have opened the door a little bit to this conversation and actually opened the door to, as you guys are saying in the chat, maybe talking about Max's conduct in a few of these different scenarios, because we know Max is a hot-headed driver. Again, we've seen it on track, off track, I don't know however many times. We know that Max is, I would say, maybe probably the most hot-headed driver on the Formula One grid. If things aren't going his way, he really does lose it over the radio. He is more than happy to throw his team, throw his teammates, throw anybody under the bus if he does not think that things are going his way, and that he is getting what he deserves, like what he thinks he deserves inside of that Red Bull car. And we all know that. We all know that Max Verstappen has been like that since day one. You can look at any on-track battle he had. You can look at the various battles that he's had with Lando Norris this year. You can look at the various incidents that he's had with Lewis Hamilton in 2021. You can look beyond that all the way back to his rookie season in 2016, or his first season in 2016, where it was like, okay, still, he's a really hard racer. He will battle. He will grind. He will do everything that he can to be aggressive and get what he wants. Yeah, exactly. He's a super hardcore, on the edge racer, and it is one of the things that people love about him. Again, it's that juxtaposition. We do need and want drivers like Max Verstappen in the sport, because he is one of the best drivers, but he does come with an edge. I think then just George Russell has explained from his perspective, and maybe from the perspective of some of the other drivers, that they find that a little bit grating now, and especially when he's so aggressive in one way or another. So to kind of run you through what George Russell said, because I haven't gone through it. I went through the Qatar stuff, obviously, post-Qatar, but now in Abu Dhabi, George Russell's come out and said, I find it all quite ironic considering Saturday night, he said he was going to purposely go out of his way to crash into me and, quote, put me on my effing head in the wall. Which does, considering the things that Max Verstappen has said over the radio, considering the things that we've heard Max Verstappen say in press conferences, could I imagine him saying that? Certainly. I don't know if George Russell maybe adding a little bit of je ne sais quoi to it, but could you imagine Max Verstappen saying that? Yes. And I think George Russell has done the right thing. He's just kind of stood up for himself. He said, I'm not going to sit here and accept that. People have been bullied by Max for years now, and you can't question his driving abilities. So, George Russell accepts that. George Russell knows he's one of the best drivers in the Formula One grid. Everybody knows he's one of the best drivers on the Formula One grid. But he can't deal with adversity. Whenever anything has gone against him, Jeddah 21, Brazil 21, he lashes out. Budapest this year, the very first race that his car wasn't dominant, crashing into Lewis, slamming his team. And George Russell hasn't said anything there that I think is massively egregious, to be honest. I think he has pointed out what I've just said. George has pointed out that Max is one of the drivers on the grid that is right at the edge. And yeah, as you say, Max takes risks. He's right on the edge of the rule book. He tries to get away with as much as he possibly can. And that is probably the same on track and off track, I think your driving style and how you are in the car, as much as a lot of the drivers say, once your helmet's on, you're a different person, etc., etc. Do you think there's got to be something that bleeds into that? And then he's sort of, George Russell, I think this is probably the one bit about George Russell's statement where I'm like, maybe don't bring in the team as much as you do here. He says, I know the fact that the week after, a quarter of his engineering team were sending their CVCs to Mercedes, to McLaren, to Aston, talking about the fact that, when Max Verstappen did lash out at the team in Hungary, a lot of those people actually decided that they'd had enough and tried to move teams over to one of the other various teams that they can join on the Formula One grid. And I think that statement from George Russell's a little bit harsh. I think those, the Red Bull team members, they work incredibly hard. They work as hard as every other team on the grid. They are putting in weeks, months of their lives to try and put Max Verstappen in the best position possible. I can understand that when they put out a car, they will be disappointed in the same way that Verstappen is disappointed. When you're behind the scenes, you don't, Max Verstappen isn't telling them anything that they don't know. They won't be very happy at all to put out a car that they don't think can win Grand Prix, considering how good they have been over the last few seasons. And I don't know if you can question their loyalty in that way, or question their like job security in that way. I don't know how George Russell was hoping that was phrased, but again, I think you can point this at Max. Maybe don't point it necessarily at the engineers who are working incredibly hard behind the scenes. I thought it was interesting that then when it came to George Russell's press conference, Toto Wolff was also there. Toto Wolff also had his say. It had very it was echoes of 2021, wasn't it? It was starting to get Toto Wolff and Christian Horner involved. Mercedes versus Red Bull. I mean, if there were ever to be a championship where it was George Russell versus Max Verstappen, it's looking unlikely in the next few seasons. Well, actually, 2026. It's looking unlikely next season, just because Ferrari and McLaren look best poised to kind of progress into next year, and they seem to understand their car a lot at the moment. But if we did get a championship battle between these two, it would probably be one of the most heated. And again, like in a few years' time, it would probably be the kind of thing you'd make a movie about, right? You talk about Niki Lauda versus James Hunt and the juxtaposition of characters coming full circle. George Russell, Max Verstappen would make a very, very entertaining like storyline if that were ever to happen and they were ever to go sort of wheel to wheel for a championship. Sparks would definitely fly. But coming to it, George Russell was joined by Toto Wolff, as I said, and Toto Wolff does like to sort of get involved a little bit. I think Toto Wolff did the right thing in defending his driver. He did the right thing in coming out. Got to remember, George Russell is not just part of Toto Wolff's team, but is also represented by Toto Wolff. Like, he is his manager as well. So there's a lot that he's got in there when it comes to Toto Wolff. And he says, as a team principal, it's important to be a sparring partner for your drivers. If you don't do that, you're falling short of your role. It's just weak. So Toto Wolff kind of aimed more of his criticisms at Christian Horner, to be honest, and sort of saying there, Christian Horner's been a weak team principal to allow Max Verstappen to get to the point where Max Verstappen is this all-dominant force within the team. And Max Verstappen seemingly, almost is Red Bull at this point. As much as Christian Horner probably doesn't want that to be true, I do think, if Max Verstappen left at this moment in time, the team would be in such a horrendous position. For them, they're probably lucky that Max Verstappen is, on a very, very long deal, signed up for the next few years, and won the championship this year, so probably won't be leaving anytime soon. Depending on how much the Red Bull team can offer him in 2026, that may change. But then Toto Wolff kind of continued. He did appreciate that he did lose it a little bit when he heard that Horner suggested Russell's hysterics in front of the stewards. And yeah, again, Christian Horner's kind of poked the bear a little bit there, hasn't he? They do love to just wind each other up. And then Toto Wolff said, why does he feel entitled to comment about my driver? if you're thinking about it and you spent 90 seconds to think about it, then he kind of stopped and then he said that Christian Horner is a yapping little terrier, always says something. And to be fair, Christian Horner didn't then bite. Christian Horner was very laid back about the whole thing when he was asked about it. And he said, being called a terrier is not such a bad thing. I'd rather be a terrier than a wolf, maybe. So Christian Horner just kind of breezing past it. I do think when it comes to these two, Russell, Verstappen, the whole talking point, it's massively kind of got out of hand. Considering this was a one-place grid penalty in Qatar in qualifying that made almost no difference to the race result itself. I do like the fact that George Russell is using this as an opportunity to call out what he thinks is poor behavior from Max Verstappen and objectively sort of say Max Verstappen needs to just mature a little bit. Like, Max Verstappen hasn't really matured that much. As much as I like, sometimes it feels like he has, but that's only when he's winning a lot. And then as soon as it does go wrong, George Russell's right. He does throw his dummy out very quickly. He's a very reactive person, is Max Verstappen. But hearing Toto say yapping was crazy. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. Instances of Red Bull conceding any of Max's mistakes. I think the only problem is Max. Well, I suppose, yeah, if you're talking about sort of battles, Max makes a lot of mistakes. Like, Max picks up a lot of penalties for here, there, and everywhere. Max doesn't really make driving errors, though, generally speaking. If he, I say driving errors, he doesn't crash into walls or like throw the car in the bin or anything like that. I can't remember the last time. I think the last time Max Verstappen finished outside the top 10 is crazy. It's something like 2016 or 2017. The last time he finished outside the top 10. So not a DNF or not like a disqualification or anything like that. Actually finished a race. But I would really like to see these two championship battle. A little bit of to and fro between them, I think, would be very, very entertaining indeed. As I say, I do think this whole thing got a little bit out of hand, especially because there are so many other things that we should be talking about going into this weekend. I like the fact that Russell has called out Max for his kind of on-track and off-track antics, though. Maybe we'll see Max Verstappen a little bit sort of cooler, calmer going into next year. I can't see it happening. I'd like to see it when it happens. But on the flip side, also, like, we'll never know what happened in the stewards' room. If George Russell was being too egregious, then Max probably did have a slight sort of reason to get it a little bit frustrated. Yeah, but mountain out of a molehill. Agreed, Sarah. We'll finish up that bit there, because as Christian Horner actually said, Christian Horner did say, you know, we're spending a lot of time on this, but I'm amused that he had more on his plate. It's Lewis's final race for the team. I think he should be celebrating that rather than focusing on other aspects. And I completely agree. You know, of the drivers moving teams, you know, Carlos Sainz leaving Ferrari, Nico Hülkenberg leaving Haas, Ocon leaving Alpine, which is actually quite a big one. I think Ocon leaving Alpine, it's not nearing the level of Lewis Hamilton leaving Mercedes. I was about to say that and then redacted myself, but it is definitely, you know, more. But Lewis Hamilton moving away from Mercedes is monumental in terms of the sport. And I know that we've known about it for a very, very long time. You know, back in February, we started talking about how will Lewis Hamilton do it at Ferrari? Will he fit in here, there? Who will he take over from the Mercedes team to the Ferrari team, etc., etc.? And we started to build that picture of what the future is going to be. But I don't think we all really thought about it that much until now. And Lewis Hamilton said himself, like, he anticipated it would be difficult, but massively underestimated how difficult it would be. And I think we all have. we've all kind of just been like, oh yeah, he is moving to Ferrari, but it's still Lewis Hamilton in silver. It's still Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes as we kind of expect it to be. And that's the thing. Yeah, it's now real, isn't it? It now feels like, oh, okay, it's actually happening. Like we are going to see Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari red. We are going to see Lewis Hamilton away from Bono, away from Toto, away from the Mercedes team that he himself said he's got so many relationships with all of those team members, and all of the positivity that they've had together. Like the race put together this here of Lewis Hamilton's results in a Mercedes car. Just insane. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, if you look at it, 245 races. Obviously, still one to go, as they point out. But look how many podiums there are. Look how many P1s there are. It is just an obscene record that Lewis Hamilton has been able to have with this team. Something that I don't know if we'll see again. The longevity of it. Just been ridiculous. You kind of say it fell slightly ajar in 2021 because he stopped losing, or he stopped winning races in 2022. 2021 obviously lost out on that title marginally. Again, probably shouldn't. You can argue one way or another. And depends on whether you look at the season as a whole or whether you just look at the finale in Abu Dhabi. And I'm not going to delve into it now. But the records, the consistency, as I say, doing it from 2014 all the way through, winning championship after championship, Constructors Championship after Constructors Championship. It is an era of dominance that is unlike any that we've seen. And you can say, well, Max Verstappen won 20-odd races last year. Yeah, fair enough. Max Verstappen won almost every race last year, broke every single record. But the Red Bull team only managed to do that for 3 years. 2.5, if you kind of think of them being the fastest car out on track. The Red Bull team have only managed 2022, 2023, and half of 2024. Maybe that's even being a little bit kind, where the Red Bull car has undoubtedly been the fastest car out on the grid. And Max Verstappen has undoubtedly been the best driver. I think there's 2.5 seasons at this point. They did it for so long. Just season after season after season, continually churning out win after win after win. And just looking at it as a whole, and as I say, thank you to the race for putting this out on Twitter. It is just crazy to see how good his time at Mercedes was. And as much as it has kind of limped to an end, see where the yellow and golds kind of slowly dissipate. Couple of seasons without wins, obviously. In the middle there, couple of wins this season, though. I think in hindsight, once the season has finally ended, even though it's kind of a little bit of a bitter ending. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton wanted to leave after Brazil. He didn't want to go back to Vegas. He then didn't want to come. He didn't want to take part in the final sections of the Qatar Grand Prix. He'd had enough. But looking at that and looking at the season as a whole, his career at Mercedes as a whole, there's so much to celebrate. There's so many lovely memories, and there's so many things that he and the team need to use this weekend to sort of thank not only Lewis, but Lewis to thank the team and just thank each other, right? As an entire enterprise, they worked so well, they worked so hard, and they were dominant for so long, and they deserve, the plaudits there, and they deserve so much credit. That I'm hoping this weekend we will see at least a little bit of Lewis Hamilton love. A little bit of Lewis Hamilton getting the plaudits that he deserves. Getting the plaudits that he deserves. Getting, I don't know, something from Mercedes. I don't even know what they can give him. They've given him everything. They've given him, the records. They've given him the most wins in Formula One history. They've given him the most poles in Formula One history, the most podiums in Formula One history. They've made him the most decorated driver that there has ever been. They've put him equal on championship victories with Michael Schumacher. They were at half a lap away from beating that and making him an 8-time world champion. I don't know what more they could have delivered him, even if these last 3 years have been really tough. You know, you're going to say, well, Lewis, you can have 7 years of almost complete dominance and then follow it up with 3 years of mediocre. You'd take that, wouldn't you? You'd take that in a decade of Formula One, saying that you'll win the majority of the championships, the majority of the races. He has to, be so thankful for that team, for what they've done, how they've done it, and just be really, really grateful for them. To move to one side, though, I do think they're moving into Abu Dhabi. There's a couple of storylines left to run through. A couple of people talking about the Drivers' Championship, Constructors' Championship, Charles Leclerc. Unfortunately, Charles Leclerc has had to take a penalty. So, during free practice 1, the Ferrari car had a little problem. It was a little bit of a shame because obviously we got to see Charles Leclerc and Arthur Leclerc both in a Ferrari car together. The first time that we've seen like two brothers driven for the same team at the same time in Formula One. Obviously, we've seen brothers in Formula One before. The Schumachers is the one that comes to mind. Has there been a more recent one than the Schumachers in terms of brothers in Formula One? I don't think so. But we have seen brothers in Formula One before, but not brothers in the same team, let alone brothers in like one of the top teams. You know what I mean? Ferrari could go on to win the Constructors' Championship this year, and they are running two brothers together in a free practice 1 session. It was really, really lovely to see. But during that, Ferrari also found a problem with their ERS, which is the battery system inside of the power unit itself. It's basically what stores the energy, which then we get a lot of drivers talking about hitting that button to gain a little bit of speed, especially if you're defending from a driver with DRS. You definitely need that battery power to help you along the way. And Charles Leclerc now has a 10-place grid penalty. So has had to replace that battery inside of the car. You get 2 over the course of a season. Ferrari have needed a 3rd one, which is really annoying for them because obviously it means that you've got to put in that spare battery. That then gets used up inside of your allocation. And that's then money off of the budget cap. So like you don't get charged for parts of cars that you don't use, especially if they can roll over to next year. But that now becomes part of this year's budget cap because they have to put in the battery for this year. So that'll be something that's a little bit frustrating for them as well. But that 10-place grid penalty for Charles Leclerc does feel like it will just take Ferrari outside of the possibility of really, because a 21-point swing is still a big chunk of points that Ferrari need. They need to outscore McLaren by 22 points. So you're looking at Charles Leclerc won the race, or Carlos Sainz won the race. McLaren would still only need their drivers to finish within touching distance, 4th, 5th, and they'd still be fine. You're talking of McLaren completely throwing it away, and then also Ferrari doing really well with either one driver winning or both drivers scoring really good points. A 10-place grid penalty in a place like Abu Dhabi, even with the Ferrari car looking fairly decent in free practice 1, I think has just kind of closed that idea of Ferrari getting in front of McLaren in the constructors, and also stopped any kind of battle between Leclerc and Norris. Although, don't underestimate the power of Norris to ruin his own race. Charles still has a chance at P2, is what GameStar 70 is saying. I mean, yeah, we saw Lando Norris completely throw a race in the bin in Qatar. Like, he should have P2 in the championship under his belt, really. Should have finished 2nd place to Max Verstappen quite comfortably. So never say never, but I do think that 10-place grid penalty for Charles Leclerc kind of ruins any chances of that happening. Plus the fact that in free practice 2, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were 1st and 2nd fastest by a considerable margin as well. Like, Lando Norris was much quicker than everybody else out on track. And Oscar Piastri, a similar kind of very quick in comparison. Carlos Sainz was 4th fastest, Charles Leclerc, but they didn't look anywhere as near the McLaren's pace. And I was expecting this weekend to be more of a McLaren weekend. I was looking at I'm actually more of a 50-50. Vegas, I was definitely saying Ferrari were going to be better. Qatar, I was thinking McLaren were definitely going to be better. Abu Dhabi, I was a little bit 50-50. I mean, now looking at free practice 1, free practice 2, I'm obviously kind of leaning towards it being more of a McLaren-centric track, but we'll have to kind of wait and see. Then behind that, Nico Hülkenberg was third in free practice 2. Third place for Nico Hülkenberg. Could he get a podium finish? Like, that would be the cherry on top of the cake for Nico Hülkenberg, wouldn't it? Ending his time at Haas, a time that's been very, very successful. Got to remember, before this, he spent 3 years out in the wilderness as a reserve driver. Now he looks like one of the best drivers on the Formula 1 grid by a mile, and most teams, I think, would snap your hand off to have Nico Hülkenberg in their car. I think outside of maybe the top 4 teams, Aston Martin would love Nico Hülkenberg. Alpine would be better with Nico Hülkenberg. Haas are obviously better with Nico Hülkenberg. Any team would be much, much improved with Nico Hülkenberg. I say outside of the top 4 teams. I think Red Bull would be much improved with Nico Hülkenberg. So Nico Hülkenberg's been exceptional in the 2 years that he's had with Haas. Obviously owes them for getting him back onto the Formula 1 grid in that way. And Haas owe Nico Hülkenberg for the exceptional performances that he's put in and just continually delivering and being really consistent and delivering a really, really high standard. Imagine, though, if he then gets a podium as well. It would just be insane. It would be storyline after storyline. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. And I kind of hope it happens. But Nico Hülkenberg, third fastest in free practice 2. Of course, that doesn't mean he's going to be third fastest in qualifying or the race, and I'm not expecting that. I would like to see Nico Hülkenberg score some points, though. I think that would be really, really nice. Lewis Hamilton was 5th fastest, kind of in that mix as well, to kind of say Lewis Hamilton is having hopefully a fairly nice end. Valtteri Bottas inside the top 10. Alex Albon inside the top 10. I could get very, very competitive. Although on the Williams factor, did also mean to mention that Williams, both of the Williams cars, have a 5-place grid penalty. Again, for taking extra components. The Williams cars are taking, got it in my notes, extra gearboxes. They're taking extra gearboxes. After the excessive amount of crashing that they've done in the last few Grand Prix weekends, I think it's fair that they've needed some new components to actually manage to get their Williams cars out on track for the final race of the season. And as I say, both Williams cars taking a 5-place grid penalty, which kind of puts kibosh on them scoring points, I would imagine. And then also, again, having to take those extra gearboxes then puts that gearbox onto this year's cost cap. So it's looking tough for Williams in 2025, I'm going to be honest with you, just purely because of the amount of damage that they've done to those cars and the fact that they are way, way higher in terms of damage done and the amount of cost cap that has gone on replacing parts rather than making new parts has been a lot for Williams this season. So I think they're going to be in a tough, tough spot. Ooh. What are we talking about? Andrea Stella went to Alonso from Ferrari to McLaren. Oh, you're talking about Bono. Yeah, Bono is going on to be a race engineer. He's not going to be Hamilton's race engineer. Not going anywhere. That is a shame, isn't it? They sometimes do move with them, yeah. It just depends on the team dynamic, really. It depends also what they do, because a lot of the time the race engineer isn't obviously just the guy that talks to the driver on the radio. They also do a lot of stuff behind the scenes for the team elsewhere. Carlos Sainz, there was an interview with him recently. He was kind of saying, again, he would love to take his race engineer with him over to Williams, but he works for Ferrari and is also based in Italy and has a family in Italy. And that's the other thing. Like, Bono maybe doesn't want to move to Italy. Like, if you work for Ferrari, you have to move to Italy. If you work for pretty much any of the other teams, you have to move to the UK. So that is it's probably the most difficult driver swap. You know what I mean? If you're working for Ferrari and moving to another team, it's difficult because you do have to make that transition. And again, if you're moving from any other team to Ferrari, it's big because you have to move either to or from Italy. And Carlos Sainz has got the same problem. The engineer, sorry, that he's worked with at Ferrari, he would love to take over to Williams, but can't. And then similarly, I think Lewis Hamilton would absolutely love Bono to be able to go over to Ferrari with him, but that can't happen and won't be the case. But yeah, really good point. You would think that would be, you'd almost think like the engineer would come along with the driver, but the engineer is not part of the driver's team as such. They are actually an employee of Mercedes or Ferrari, and therefore they do have other jobs outside of just being the race engineer on race day. Final couple of things, just talking about the rookies that were there. Obviously, I mentioned Arthur Leclerc for Ferrari. I'd recommend sort of going back and watching Free Practice 1. There was Felipe Drugovich in an Aston Martin. Hirakawa, sorry, for McLaren. I always get his name wrong. He is the Toyota guy, racer. Maybe we'll end up seeing him in a Haas sometime soon. He was all right. He was pretty good inside of the McLaren car. Again, worth watching. Hirakawa, maybe a name that we might see linked to Haas in the future. Because as I say, he's a Toyota driver. He ended up getting linked with McLaren because of McLaren's links with Toyota. But now Toyota working more closely with Haas. Kind of keep an eye on him. Because maybe he'll end up moving into a Haas seat. Iwasa got a run out in an RB. Hadjar got a run out in a Red Bull. You know, on the weekend where he could win the Formula 2 championship, but he was much better, actually. I think Hadjar, although he had a little bit of a problem to begin with, it was his steering wheel was like hitting his legs, which is never great, right? You're trying to turn the wheel and then it just hits your legs on the way around. So Hadjar had a little bit of a problem to begin with, but was much better in Abu Dhabi than he was in Silverstone earlier on in the year. And then Luke Browning for Williams. I know that Williams, you know, rattling through junior drivers at this point. We've had Sargent, now we've had Colapinto, and now Browning in the car as well. I suppose we'll see a lot more of Browning because Colapinto won't count towards the rookie Free Practice 1 sessions, even if he does take part in Free Practice 1 sessions next year, because he's had over 2 Grand Prix worth of experience. Obviously 9 Grand Prix now under Franco Colapinto's belt. So Williams, Luke Browning we might see a little bit more of. And again, he was not great. He was a little bit slow. But his first time out in a Formula 1 car, and probably was not expecting to be in a Formula 1 car anytime soon. So the fact that he's been fast-tracked into that for the final Abu Dhabi test, done really, really well. So if McLaren wins, they get lesser wind tunnel time. That is very true. That is very true. Do I think Charles can recover from 10-place grid penalty to help Ferrari win the Constructors' Championship? I don't think so. 21 points. A little bit too much. Can Hamilton learn Italian? I imagine he will be trying to. We'll have to wait and see. It does seem to be a thing, though. Like, all of the Ferrari drivers that I can think of have all had to learn Italian. Because, as you say, the team is based in Italy. Everybody is Italian. So, hopefully, he will learn Italian. I'm trying to think, has there been any Ferrari drivers that haven't learned Italian? It's not one of those things that you kind of see. Carlos Sainz is like fluent now. Charles Leclerc the same. All that Vettel was. Yeah, I think it's just like a must do. I think you have to, otherwise you just really struggle to get that back and forth. What does it mean, lesser wind tunnel? So you get so this championship, the Constructors' Championship, not only does it dish out prize money, so the higher up here, you get about 10 million per place. So McLaren basically earn an extra 10 million compared to Ferrari in second place, and then Ferrari earn an extra 10 million compared to Red Bull. It's about 10 million per position. So money-wise, you want to finish higher up as possible. But then you also have CFD, which is the amount of wind tunnel tests that you are allowed to do over the course of a season. And that amount of time that you get, the lower down the Constructors' Championship you finish, the more wind tunnel time you get. So it's basically to try and sort of give the teams at the top a little bit of a a negative and a little bit of a, okay, let's try and drag them in a bit. And the teams towards the bottom, you're kind of giving them a perk and trying to boost them up by giving them a little bit more wind tunnel time than the rest. So instead of it being, I'll simplify the numbers, not quite this, but let's say there's 100 wind tunnel tests that they're allowed to split between the teams. Instead of McLaren getting 10, Ferrari getting 10, Red Bull getting 10, etc., they kind of tier it a little bit. So McLaren only get 6 wind tunnel tests, and Stake Sauber at the bottom get like 17 wind tunnel tests. So like they tier it so that the lower down you finish, the more wind tunnel testing you're allowed to do. And that helps massively. Wind tunnel tests and the data that you get from that in terms of aerodynamics really does help, obviously, move that forward. Did Kimi Räikkönen never learn Italian? I assumed he did. That is poor from Kimi. Although very Kimi, isn't it? It's just if there's a driver that's going to get away with it, it probably is Kimi Räikkönen. I think anyone else, I'd be like, oh, I should have just learned it. That's so disrespectful. And then you're like, yeah, Kimi did it. You're like, well, what were they expecting? What did they think was going to happen? Of course he wasn't. Kimi Räikkönen, for goodness sake. So either Sauber can get more money or wind tunnel time. Yeah, it's kind of that. It's the back and forth. It's the twos and fros of the Formula One. You can either get more money, which obviously does really help, is budget cap, and especially for the teams in the middle here, they would prefer the cash. Like Haas would prefer the 10 mil. Teams towards the top, you could argue that actually Red Bull won't be too worried about finishing in third place, or like too concerned about finishing in third place, because they do get a little bit of extra cash in terms of what they can gain from being here, there, or whatever. But that's generally speaking how it goes. Obviously, they slightly dumbed down. It's not exact science how much they get, but it is pretty much related to the amount of wind tunnel time. Higher you finish in the championship, more you get, lower you finish in the championship. Sorry, higher you finish in the championship, less wind tunnel time. Lower you finish in the championship, more wind tunnel time. Final thing I want to run by you, as we're having a little chat. I have really enjoyed this, actually. It's been lovely. This photo here. I think this is the most important story of the entire week. I'm going to be honest. Oh yeah, Ferrari does also get a bonus. Cash bonus. So does Williams. You get a heritage bonus for however many years you've been in Formula One. I think, though, in the next agreement for 2026, that heritage bonus is being taken away. But Ferrari, yeah, do get a little bit extra cash. But, as I say, the most important thing, this picture here, I put it out on the community tab for you guys so that you could see it. And I appreciated some of your guys' workings out, but I do think you were wrong. I think here, first and foremost, no Fernando Alonso. Well, that was interesting. Whether or not Fernando Alonso was ill or couldn't make it, I don't know. If anybody does know why Fernando Alonso was not involved, if you could raise your hand and let us know, that'd be great, because I couldn't find out why. I tried to find out why, and there wasn't really any information on it. It was just, yeah, Fernando wasn't there. Cool, great. But where would you sit? Where would you sit exactly? Where on earth are you going to slot in inside of the grid? And we take this incredibly seriously. We did it last year. We talked about it in a lot of detail. We are going to... Oh, is it going to work? We are going to delve into it in severe detail, because it does have to be done. Bottas paid the bill. Is that true? No Alonso, Stroll, or K-Mag. Yeah, Fernando Alonso, though, I feel like it's the most sort of unexpected of those. Stroll not being invited. And Kevin Magnussen. Yeah, maybe Kevin Magnussen not being there is a little bit of a weird one. So, we have to decide here. We've got the table. We need to decide where we're going to sit. I, personally, being a McLaren fan, This end of the table is feeling very, very good for me. Not only would I get to talk to Oscar and Lando, like I'm kind of thinking, was it Sally in the chat who said they would sit where the camera is? No, Sarah, sit me where the camera person is at. Exactly. I think where the camera person is at is a great spot to sit. You're sitting Piastri to your left, Lawson to your right. Lawson seems like a great laugh. You know, he has seen a lot of the Cars movies, a lot of the times. So we could have a chat about that. I really would like to sit next to Yuki, though. I'm almost slightly tempted to sit right next to Yuki Tsunoda. I just think he'd be the most fun. I think he'd be the most entertaining of the entire grid. Right? I think Yuki Tsunoda would be the most fun on a meal / night out. I do also like the fact that if you sit next to Yuki, you get the nice corner. You know what I mean? I feel like, apart from Yuki, who's got a little temper on him, Liam Lawson, Zhou Guanyu, Alex Albon, probably the 3 nicest men on the Formula 1 grid, I would imagine. Definitely, like Zhou and Albon, certainly. Of the drivers on the Formula 1 grid, probably just the nicest characters that you could ask for. So if you do sit there, you get probably a lovely time. I like the fact that Zhou Guanyu and Alex Albon are sat next to each other. I think they just had a beautiful conversation about something that was very, very cute. You know what I mean? I think they probably had a wonderful, wonderful chat together. Then there's a part of me that does want to sit here. Those 2 cheeky little chappies there. Charles Leclerc, Pierre Gasly. They're right up. Pierre Gasly is one of my absolute favourite drivers. Charles Leclerc seems, again, just like a lovely man. So if you sit anywhere, if you sit yourself right next to Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly, and I know that I've effectively said that I'd sit anywhere amongst this right-hand side of the table. Because I do just think this right-hand side of the table, from Oscar, I think from this point here, sitting next to Oscar, all the way along there, I'd love to sit next to Lawson. I'm happy sitting next to Yuki. I think Joe would be a great combo. I think Alex would be lovely to talk to. I think Pierre would be brilliant. There is Valtteri Bottas just hidden under here that you can't see. He's underneath me. Again, Valtteri Bottas, I imagine, is an absolute blast. Like, Valtteri Bottas is just there behind Alex Albon. But there's something that does call to me about sitting next to Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly. I just think, you know, they're already friends. There's a lot of banter there. There's probably a lot of inside jokes that you would get to be a part of. You would get to ask them about. You'd sort of say, well, hang on. Hang on, Charles. Gasly's just called you that. What's the story there? I think that would be a definite conversation that you would have. And also the fact that if you do sit, I like the fact that Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton are already pairing up. George Russell obviously can't escape. George Russell and Charles Leclerc there were undoubtedly just vying for Lewis Hamilton's attention. Lewis, talk to me. Lewis, turn left. Talk to Leclerc, your new teammate. No. George's on the other side. No, Lewis. Talk to me, your current teammate, the man who's been at Mercedes with you for a long time. We already know each other well. He's talking. I feel like that would have been, if anything, that would have detracted. I think if you sit next to Charles Leclerc, you're probably going to end up spending most of the time talking to Pierre. Because I imagine Charles knocking on Lewis Hamilton's shoulder pretty consistently. Lewis, I know we're going to be teammates next year. Let me tell you about Maranello. Let me tell you about this lovely ice cream that I've got. I think that would be the conversation that's had between there. I do want to sit next to Carlos. I don't want to sit next to Sergio. I don't know what it is about Sergio. I just don't really like him. I think it's just not just because of his driving over the last couple of seasons that has not been right up there. But I do think I'd love to sit next to Carlos. I wish Carlos was sitting on the other side of the table. And you've kind of noticed maybe that I am gravitating towards this side of the table, probably closer to the camera than further away. As much as I'd love to sit next to Gasly and Leclerc, I do think that trio is trouble. in terms of the conversation being drawn away from myself and just talking to Lewis. I don't want to sit down this side of the table. I don't want to sit here. I don't know what it is. This has given me the side of the table that maybe got there afterwards. You know what I mean? I feel like Leclerc and Gasly, they arrived together. You know? Albon probably at the similar sort of time. I reckon Albon actually probably arrived with like Yuki and Lawson, and then they inherited Joe. They were like, Joe, come on in. We're RB drivers / ex-RB drivers. Come on in, Joe. Get involved. And that was where this 4 kind of reacted. I imagine they all came together or at a similar time. And again, they wanted to sit together. This here, from Perez to Verstappen, just seems like drivers that nobody 100% wanted to sit next to. You know, I think they ended up being that point in the table where it's like everybody else had kind of paired off a little bit. And then nobody really wanted to speak to them. I think it's a little bit weird where Hülkenberg is. I feel like Hülkenberg would be good chat. But then I think he's a little bit older, isn't he? Nico Hülkenberg wants to talk to Sergio Perez. They're talking taxes. They're talking mortgages, children, that kind of thing. Parenting. They're a little bit older, aren't they, on that side? Whereas Yuki, Lawson, they're talking about cars, movies. But this side, I think Franco's a little bit of an odd one out here. I think this side of the table, they're talking about parenthood. Yeah, Ocon obviously not yet, but Ocon seems like a wise head, doesn't he? Seems older than he maybe is. So I can understand him maybe getting in there. And also the fact that not a lot of them like Ocon. not a lot of drivers seem to like Esteban Ocon very much. It's not entirely his fault. You can argue it. But yeah, I don't think you want to sit on this side of the table. I'm sorry, lads. It's not for me. Lando being next to Max, of course it was going to happen. But that does detract. I'd rather sit next to Oscar and have the opportunity of not really having to interact with Max too much. You know, as soon as they're 2 people away from you, I feel like you're not interacting too much with them. You know what I mean? That's the way I kind of see it, unless you're opposite. So, like, if you do sit on this side of the table, maybe you'd have to chat to Hülkenberg or Ocon. That's the thing. If you're sitting here with Liam Lawson, I think Liam's just taking me under his wing, to be honest. I feel like me and Liam are having a lovely time. We're getting Oscar involved. Yuki's enjoying it. I'd love to go see your guys working out, but that's my working out there. So I'm sticking with my guns. I'm sitting where the cameraman currently is. And then if I'm not allowed to sit there, maybe I'm a little bit late. Or maybe I've arrived and Oscar and Lawson are already deep in conversation. So you don't want to sit in the middle of them, do you? Be a very, very awkward position to be in. You know, I'm trying my best to slot in somewhere along here. I'm being like, oh, Yuki, yeah, shuffle along. Yuki, I'm catching up with Yuki. You know, I'm trying to get in and amongst this side of the table. Trying to get in there. But that's my working out. As I say, it's always a very, very important part of the Formula One season. Always a very, very important part of the Formula One year. Deciding where you would sit at the Formula One driver's meal, I think, deserves a lot more talking about. Got to stay near Franco and Oscar. Harder to relate to the old men. That's another thing. You know, I'm only ticking up towards 30. Camera position, second choice between Max and Lando. Prime T-split. That is very true. Max would tell you some stories, I imagine. Charles and Lewis look so cozy. Hope it stays like that. Oh, yeah, definitely. This was definitely Charles Leclerc trying to get Lewis on his good side, wasn't it? You got Charles Leclerc and his boy Pierre Gasly to his left. And he's like, Gasly, we get private jets with each other all the time. I'm seeing you on holiday in a couple of weeks. We're both going to Spain together. I'm going to spend time with Lewis. So you can definitely tell that Gasly kind of came along with Leclerc, but Leclerc had other things planned. Leclerc was like, no, this is my opportunity to get to know Lewis a bit better. Gasly was like, oh, but I'm here, Charles. Remember, we're best friends. Charles Leclerc was like, stop it. Talking to Lewis. And then George was like, no, I'm talking to Lewis. And then that's where it got very complex at the end of that table. And then just on the other side of the table, to be honest, I imagine this here was dead silence. I can kind of understand Sergio and Carlos sitting next to each other. A little bit of the Spanish connection, you know. But I imagine Hulkenberg, Ocon, there was some silences and there was some awkwardness. There was some tension. Like there was a bit of a moment like, I don't know what to say to you. You've done great at Haas. I guess I'm taking your seat. Like, is that what they're saying? Is that what they're saying to each other? Maybe. What do I think they ordered? Let's not delve into that. I don't even know what type of restaurant this is. Looking by the marbling, I'm gonna say Spanish cuisine. Don't know why I'm feeling that. Abu Dhabi, maybe tapas. The red wine feels very tapas. Not sure why. Getting tapas. Feel like Yuki also had to learn Italian. But yeah, Yuki's learned a little bit of Italian. Utter silence. Exactly. This is silence. This is nothing happening there. Nothing happening. Also, Franco. Don't know what Franco's probably talking to Max, isn't he? Feel like Franco's pivoted that way. Oh, Lando. Tell me about Quadrant. Digging up the intel. That's what I mean. I think Ocon and Hulkenberg, they talked about Haas, right? They went, oh, what's Haas like? Oh, yeah, it's lovely. Oh, remember when we were at Renault? Oh, how's Alpine doing? Falling apart. You know, they talked about that where, you know, there's been some crossover of them two at teams and obviously talking about Haas next year. Oh, what's IU like? Oh, he's all right, yeah. How have Toyota been? Yeah, all right. And then they reached the end of that. They were like, right, we've talked about Renault. We talked about Haas. God knows what else. Whereas you can imagine, like, this part of the table didn't talk about Formula One once. There was not a Formula One word spoken. You could have told me that they're not even Formula One drivers. You would not be able to tell they were Formula One drivers from the fact of this. Where's Bottas? Bottas is like here. Sorry, he is underneath me. Hang on. Here you go. There's Valtteri. Valtteri kind of did the lean back in the photo. Again, I feel like sitting next to Bottas, not a bad shout. Albon Bottas combo, quite nice. I feel like he turned right, talked to Valtteri Bottas. What's happening next, Valtteri? Give me the inside scoop. He'd show you his bum. Then you turn to your left. Oh, Alex, you're lovely. Let's talk about golf and tennis and that. That'd be quite nice. Yeah, Valtteri on the end. Valtteri picked up the bill. Who's alone in the No. Valtteri wasn't alone. I feel like Valtteri was close enough to Lewis. You know, there's the old teammates there. And also I feel like Valtteri's quite nicely positioned, actually. He's got Charles Leclerc, Pierre Gasly to his right, Lewis there as well. And kind of chat to those guys. Albon and Tsunoda and Joe to his left. I feel like Bottas in a nice little position there. Very nice little position for Valtteri Bottas. It is nice that Valtteri picked up the bill. That's interesting. I know that Lewis picked up the bill for when it was like Seb's final season. I remember that one. Did they do a Ferrari? Did they do a driver meal last year? Probably. Valtteri all day long. Is it fish? I thought it was sushi. To make Lando run away. Starting to look like a Clodo board. It is. Depot between Gasly and Bottas. Gasly and Bottas, that's a good shout, actually. Very, very good shout. There's an intelligent shout. You've got Gasly there. You're definitely going to get the chance to chat to Gasly. Because Charles Leclerc's ignoring him. Charles Leclerc knows that they're going on holiday later. Ignoring him. And you've also got Bottas there. Got Albon there. Good chat. Good chat, I reckon. Love it. Well, that's where we're going to end that. I think more analysis went into that than anything else that we've done over the course of the season, but that's the quality content that you can expect from this channel. As I said at the beginning, thank you guys so much for watching throughout the entire season. I know that we've got a couple more live streams, we've got qualifying, we've got the Grand Prix itself, but I do massively appreciate it. We'll also have quite a few live streams coming your way throughout December up until probably Christmas, New Year. And then we just start all over again, don't we? It'll be the season of driver and livery reveals, but we're just going to do that all in one, aren't we? There's the big event. Still haven't got a ticket to it. Still trying. We'll see if we get an event ticket for that in 2025. But as I was just going to say, massively thankful to all of you guys for every single view, every single like, every single subscribe, every single thing that you guys do. It's wonderful to spend time with you and just get to have a little bit of fun, talk about Formula One. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Earth Hour. Thank you, Sally, Sarah. Just everybody in the chat trying to go. Antonio as well, of course, is here. Thank you, mate. Like, Antonio's been here forever. Should just assume that Antonio is always in the chat. But no, really do appreciate it. For those of you that are members or patrons, if you want to become a member or patron, you can in the description down below for just £3 a month. Think of it as the equivalent of, if you bumped into me in the street, maybe you'd buy me a coffee or you'd buy me a pint if you're that way inclined. And I'd say, no, thank you, I don't drink. But I'd appreciate it nonetheless. If you did, and you do want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it. Like, directly support the channel. Obviously, liking, watching, subscribing is fundamental. But when it comes to, if you want to help out a little bit more, members, patrons, and if you are part of that, you can also join us. We're going to watch Senna episode 2. I am now, I realize, a little bit late to that watch along because this has gone on longer than I expected. But I was just having a lovely time, having a little chat. Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow for Abu Dhabi qualifying. I can't remember what time it is. 1:30 UK time. Be there or be square.